All right, welcome everyone. I am Jeffrey Graybill. I'm a clinical assistant professor in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute at Georgia State University. Thank you for joining us. We have an outstanding panel scheduled for you today. First, we're going to have Michelle Ferrier and Elizabeth Mays, who are the co-editors of the 2017 Open Rebus Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship textbook, talk to you and describe that process. Then I'm going to talk to you about an Affordable Learning Georgia grant, as well as contributing content to the media innovation text, along with an OpenStax book on entrepreneurship. And then finally, we have Barbie Chambers, who will share with you using some of the materials in some of her courses. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle Ferrier and Elizabeth Mays, the co-editors of the Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship textbook.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and Liz is going to kick us off this morning.
Fantastic. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how this book came to be. And we've essentially introduced ourselves, but at the time this book began in early 2017, I happened to be an adjunct teaching a entrepreneurial journalism course at Arizona State University. And I was also at the time working full-time with Rebus, which was building a new model for publishing for OER. And they were looking for different pilot projects in the OER space. And I had this idea after teaching the class and really struggling to find resources for the syllabus as I was rebuilding it, that there was really no good resource out there. There was no one place I could send students. I was sending them to links all over the internet. And I had heard that other professors teaching the same subject had the same issue. Michelle and I were both involved in the Scripps Howard Journalism Entrepreneurship Institute, which had been held at the Cronkite School at Arizona State for many years. And that's actually how we had met. And at the time, I had this thought, what if, I've heard other people say they're having the same problem. What if I went to everyone and said, why don't we build a resource that we can all use in our classes? And at the same time, I saw a post from Michelle, my old friend, on Facebook saying, I want to get together all the people I know who are teaching this and build a resource. And I thought, wait, if we both do this, we're all going to go to the same people and ask them to build essentially 2 chapters for 2 different resources. Why don't we combine forces? And I went to Rebus and they were on board with making this one of the pilot projects. And so many months transpired of work and collaboration. And by the end of it, it wasn't just us. It was 30 or more authors who had contributed chapters, sidebars, other materials to the resource. We ended up having 12 peer reviewers, 1 for each chapter, as well as additional peer reviewers for the full book. In addition, we beta tested the book in 12 different classrooms of faculty and students there, and had an open review process where we also accepted feedback from all of those who were using the book in all of these different ways. And when we iterated several times on the book before officially launching it, but after it was officially launched, it was adopted by 36 universities that we know of, meaning they filled out the adoption form to say, I am adopting this in my class. There may be more who are using it. And then the PDF and ebook formats have been downloaded almost 2,000 times. I will note that those don't need to be downloaded to use the book. The book is free, it's open, it's available on the internet. There's nothing you actually have to actively do to assign it or to use it as a student or a faculty member. And of course, this is not only providing a resource that didn't exist before in a certain space, but also saving students money. And with that, I think I will toss to Michelle to talk a little bit more about the community behind the book.
Great. So thanks, Liz. So Liz mentioned both of us were coming from this problem from different perspectives. One, I was one of the inaugural participants in the Scripps Howard Journalism Entrepreneurship Institute, and worked with my fellow educators there to look at and understand how we might be able to build not only content and materials for sharing innovation and entrepreneurship in this space, but also to create a community and a movement towards introducing these types of innovation and entrepreneurship classes across the curriculum in other schools. So in both in the Institute as well as online, we built a community of practice basically that was working collaboratively to share resources and to ensure that they could get the material that they need. So when I put my post on Facebook, it was to a group of educators as well as entrepreneurs and others who had been working in and building media innovations at the local as well as regional and national levels, and wanted a community of practice that involved not just educators in higher education, but also the larger community of entrepreneurs who were building in this space. And so when Liz approached me to collaborate on this project, we already had a deep community that had been working together for several years to institute these types of classes in the classroom. We had a pretty good idea of what we needed in terms of resources in a book. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the design of the book and why it was really important in terms of structuring it as an open resource. And so from that community of practice, we really looked at and structured the textbook as a modular learning tool, meaning we sat down as educators and as entrepreneurs and collectively worked together to think about how do we structure the learning for the students who are learning this new entrepreneurship way of being. What we were doing was building this new area within journalism. And while entrepreneurship has been and continues to be taught out of business schools, sometimes media entrepreneurship even being taught by business teachers, we were working with a cadre of educators who came out of the journalism and communication fields and were teaching entrepreneurship. And some of them who did or did not have entrepreneurship experience of their own. And so we collectively worked to design and think about how we wanted students to build two of the key goals of the book. One is to instill an entrepreneurial mindset in students, so help them understand the process of entrepreneurship as it happens as a whole. Two, to help them understand how entrepreneurship is applied and designed within a media and communications context. And I'd say the third goal of the project for me and embedded in the open educational resource movement is the movement towards acting and building this resource in a digital feminist rhetorical manner, meaning that we used an open and collaborative community, that we were polyvocal in inviting the voices of not just educators or experts into the text, but it also includes the very entrepreneurs who have built products and or services over the past several years. It includes students who were still on the journey of entrepreneurship, perhaps building out an idea. And it included the larger universe of experts in business and other spaces so that we could provide that comprehensive kind of 360 look in the design of the book to move students from understanding how to create an idea to looking at testing whether that idea is valid, to then deploying and distributing that product or service in the marketplace and testing its validity. So our goal was to structure the book in a way that not only could we create that groundwork and the framework for them to build their knowledge as an entrepreneur and that entrepreneurial mindset, but that they could also come back to this resource as an entrepreneur. Maybe not in the semester that they're teaching the class, but maybe down the road, and use this resource as they need to in picking up various chapters. Some of the other things that we thought about as well was not only in the design of the book, as well as making sure it was polyvocal, but we included feedback from all of those different voices and stakeholders throughout the building process itself. As Liz mentioned, we were a pilot project for Rebus, which is an open publisher. And so we were actually building the systems for Rebus as we were building this book itself. And I think one of the ways in which processes differed very much from the traditional kind of edited volume is that not only did we engage the editors in the design and structure of the table of contents itself, the community in inviting their feedback about what should be included in the book itself, but also throughout the design and development process, we use this community to provide feedback, as well as providing technologies like Hypothesis that allowed for annotation by readers, by students who were reading the text, as well as by our peer reviewers as well, to help us continually refine the book. And it was very helpful, particularly to have student feedback, especially in our beta testing, because we are introducing them to a new discipline and a new area. There's lots of new language and structures, and we wanted to make sure we were clear in our communication. And students used Hypothesis to tell us about terms or things that were unclear that we could clarify in future versions. We also added technologies to add quizzes and other interactives to the tools as well as worked with Rebus to think about ways in which we needed to deploy this content on different modalities and in different formats to make it as accessible as possible to students on a computer, on their mobile phones, or wherever they might need to access the content. We built the initial content, as I said, very collaboratively, and then in a beta process, used a group of educators who were teaching the course in the fall of 2018 to actually fly alongside of them as they were teaching the course. So basically how this went was each week, we basically were running a weekly call where we brought together both the editors ourselves, as well as the writer of the chapter or writers for the chapter, and the educators who were teaching the course and teaching that chapter that week. And we would use it as a coaching call to look at the text itself, the contents, talk about pedagogy and how we were going to introduce these types of things in the classroom, look at how we were going to assess whether students learned what they were supposed to learn, and use the community calls as a way not only to help polish the text itself, but also to train the trainers, to help educate the professors themselves about how to teach the material. And that train the trainer model was very successful in the classrooms that we deployed it in, and got tremendous feedback from both the educators as well as the students about the value of that kind of fly along coaching, especially in a new area like this. We used those bi-weekly Zoom calls, promoted them, and we invited the larger public into those calls as well. So they could also see and build a curriculum at their own institutions based on those calls as well. So that mentorship and how I teach this portion of those weekly calls really provided the valuable support that educators who perhaps were not entrepreneurs or didn't consider themselves innovators had a pool of people, as well as a pool of classroom visits, people who could visit their classroom and talk about their experiences and enrich the classroom environment with those external voices that were prominent in our book. We did that beta testing. We got that feedback from the educators, but we also did a very formal peer review process with book reviewers to ensure that pedagogically as well as content-wise, we had been full and complete in reviewing our textbook. Now I'm going to talk to Liz to talk about the production aspects from her point of view as a Rebus employee and some of the challenges and opportunities available through open educational resources. Liz?
Sure. Can you forward the
There we are.
so I would actually like to say that building the book was a challenge, but maintaining the book is probably the thing that I would like everyone to take away as one of the key challenges to an OER. We do update the book every year. Usually in summer, we want to keep the version stable during a semester in case someone has made a quiz or something that they're really using exactly the book verbatim. So we do try to keep that stable. Every time we update it, we do post a note in the beginning of the book saying what was updated that fall. A lot of the additions are things that we've been wanting to add at the outset, but weren't quite able to make happen on the original deadline. And then there are some chapters, of course, in the journalism space that go out of date and do need to be updated to make them timely and current. And those things come from a mix of people who are using the book saying, hey, I need this thing. Would I be able to contribute that? Or would someone be able to contribute that? Could you find someone? And us also identifying spaces we've really wanted to fill in and reaching out again to that community of practice. But this is where we need the community's help the most. So if anyone is interested on this call and contributing, we would love to hear from you. You can find more about the book in general. We did a blog post about some of the things we learned about the process. There is information in a report that Rebus has done. You'll see the project page where you can essentially join the project here. And then if you'd like to use the book in your class, the bit.ly MIE open textbook will take you straight to the homepage. You can have students go straight there. They can just read it online. They can read it on their cell phone. They could download it in the alternate formats if they would like to. And we've recently begun building a YouTube channel, but we haven't got very far along with that. If you would like to help, again, we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. I believe we just had a few credits. And we're going to leave questions to the end of the session. So at this point, I'm going to toss back to Jeffrey to share his screen and continue with his Georgia grant.
Thank you so much. Right. So thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. I'd like to talk about both creation and adoption of OER materials. I was involved with both. So I actually was at a media and communication program and contributed a chapter to the Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship textbook Michelle and Elizabeth just told you about. And then in the midst of that, moved to a business college where I am now at the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the first one since you just heard about that process. I also contributed to OpenStax, created a textbook on entrepreneurship that began, it came out in 2020, so it came out in January of this year. And then I got an Affordable Learning Georgia grant to incorporate that material into some of the courses that I'm teaching. So again, I've been both on the creation side, creating chapters, as well as sort of on the adoption side. So the OpenStax textbook, like the Rebus book, is peer reviewed. And I was both a content creator and a reviewer. I reviewed other chapters that I didn't create. And so I had been familiar with about a third of the textbook, which is why I wanted to incorporate it into some of my courses. I also, Liz mentioned in the chat that the modular format, I had been using some of the chapters from the Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship textbook in my entrepreneurship courses that I had been teaching as well. So I had found good success with using open materials. With the
Jeffrey, Jeffrey, a quick pause. Your slides are showing up, both slides, your current and the upcoming slide. And so your text is really small and we're unable to see it. So if we can change the view there, that would be helpful for us. Very good. Thank you so much.
Is that better now?
Much better.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. So yeah, the OpenStax tech is peer reviewed. And it's very a similar format. So each chapter has an introduction, 4 subsections, key terms, a summary, review questions, discussion questions, case questions, which are really mini cases, and then suggested resources at the end. And it also has a bunch of, bite-sized nuggets or chunked material throughout. They have little things called Entrepreneur in Action, Work It Out, links to learning, Are You Ready, and What Can You Do, where students can then apply the material in the book they're learning with that. So there's a lot of different aspects created within it, and all the chapters are uniform in that regard. The Affordable Learning Georgia grant, we got about a little under, but about $30,000. And the original plan was to incorporate some of these open materials into entrepreneurship courses with large numbers of students. I teach a course called Entrepreneurial Thinking for Startups. It's our largest course. It's required for, we have, so students can major, they can get a BBA in entrepreneurship. They can get bachelor's in interdisciplinary studies degrees in media entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, and biomedical enterprise. And there's also a minor in entrepreneurship. So this course is required for all students in any of those categories. So it's our largest course. We have about 6 sections a semester and about 500 to 600 students a year, but those numbers keep increasing. And then we were also going to have a new course that we created that was for anyone beforehand that wasn't required. And so the intent was to incorporate into those 2 courses where we would take the existing materials we were using, basically swap out the text. At the time, the Affordable Learning Georgia, they've retooled it a little bit, but it was called a textbook transformation grant. So the idea was that you would transform the required textbook, and that's what the intent was. With that, Jeff and Tiffany spoke yesterday about having an instructional designer, librarian, and faculty on these teams. So they really believe in interdisciplinary teams for these grants. And part of the grant, in addition to incorporating the OpenStax material into the courses, was creating supplemental material as well. So this is some of our team. We have Dan Lay, which is the business librarian here at Georgia State. Kate Kendall, who I did not have a photo for, but she's in our Office of Student Success, which some of you may be familiar with the work of Tim Rennick, who until recently ran that office. He's really the reason that Georgia State is listed as the #3 most innovative university, according to US News and World Report, every year, along with Arizona State and MIT. And so she's part of his office, creating supplemental instruction. He recently left that office and created a spinoff. We have a national center now for student success, where we can use that model for other universities. So we're really excited about that. And then I have 2 graduate assistants, Benjamin Moore and Miriam, who you see there, who have been working on creating, implementing the material and doing research, kind of studying the impact of that. So that's our team. We have an interdisciplinary team, and I'll tell you a little bit about what all we've done with the project to date. So Dan has created research guides for the courses. They're using what I believe used to be known as LibGuides, and now it has a broader use beyond just the library. But so you see on the right there, it's a customized one just for my courses. And so this is for the 3102 course, which is our next level product service design for new ventures. And he has access to the library resources that would aid them in their assignments there, as well as tutorial videos. So he creates a number of small videos that we embed into the learning management system. Then the Office of Supplemental Instruction is creating other material. Right now, we've created a portfolio, which is an outcome, and I'll show you that on the next slide. And then I've created syllabi that incorporate these materials within 2 courses. So this is a sample output of Portfolium, which is an e-portfolio that's a Microsoft product. This is a fictitious student named Paula Panther, because we're at the Panthers. And on the right, you see some sample work that students do throughout our courses, creating a business plan using what's called the 4-box business model, as well as either a lean or business model canvas. So the students of this assignment would create a sample portfolio page, export that, and Kate and her team created some material for that, and they're working on some other supplemental material we'll incorporate in the courses as well. This is an example of the syllabus for the 3101 course. You'll notice under the assigned content section where I have bits and pieces of the text speaking to the use of being able to use it. So here, textbook 1.1, then we use a discussion board, which comes from the textbook. Then there's 5.2, which is just a piece from the chapter 5, reading textbook 1.3, textbook 2.4. And then in our learning management system, we have conditional releases. So I can copy and put the text into our learning management system. I can see that students access it, require them to view it. I do pre and post reflections where they write, what do you know about these topics? Like, why do startups fail? What makes a great team? So they do a free write on that beforehand. Then after they view the material, that unlocks where they can do the post reflection. So that way I can track and see, and they talk about the reading as well within that. This is their next level course, 3102. And this semester I redid where we used a commercial textbook that cost about $150, $200. So we completely swapped that out and replaced it. Now the OpenStax textbook has 15 chapters, so it worked really well, but the first 8 or so chapters I use in 3101. The next chapters I use in 3102. And if you look on 3102, I'd have them read more full chapters like 6.4 and then textbook 10, so the entire text. So that would be 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4. And then I put it here, telling the students, promoting the value of open resources. So I say there in the syllabus, the required material will be embedded and integrated into iCollege, which is our learning management system, but you can buy the print version for a nominal fee. In many instances, you have to directly access it through iCollege to receive completion credit. And then all versions are completely free to you, as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character Maui told Moana in the Disney animated flick of the same name, "You're welcome." So I have a little bit of fun too in promoting OER to the students. We did have some changes during COVID as a result. So in spring 2020, the university guidance, we had 50,000 students. So they were worried that that would tax the bandwidth when we suddenly shifted to an online environment in March. So the guidance was that the courses should be largely in an asynchronous delivery format. Then in the summer of 2020, for the first time, this 3101 course was launched online. And the university's CETL, the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, offered a program, a certificate program on mastering online teaching. So I took that course along with lots of others and designed the course with those best practices in mind to maintain this asynchronous format. However, we were given the option to keep the scheduled time in the summer. So we maintained that synchronous meeting time, and that was important because we used group work. So we had the groups be able to have that agreed upon time that they could work during that time period. Fall 2020, all sections are online out of necessity. And so, this textbook grant wasn't designed with online in mind, but it worked out really well being able to embed it into the course management system and have everything there for students to use, particularly in an asynchronous manner. And then in spring 2021, we're going to have one section be mask to mask, I'm assuming, so face-to-face, and the rest will still be online. The instructors have a mixed method of delivery, so some like to teach synchronous every week, some like to do an asynchronous format. And so really what I found is working best for us is a mixture of both. But so COVID changed some of the things in terms of our implementation, and the material worked really well in that regard. Let's see, not sure, can't fix this. Let me move forward for some reason, technical difficulties. Oh, that's weird. Let me. Sorry about this. I'm not sure why I can't advance the slides. Well, if I could stop, can someone stop sharing? We'll just turn it over to Barbie for now, and I can maybe if we have later, we'll go elsewhere. I'm not able to do that either. Okay, cool. Now it's working. Can you still see that? No. You're muted.
We
You might
stopped
wanna-
sharing so that Barbie could move forward.
Yeah, we'll just move on to Barbie for now.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. You can go ahead and start.
Can y'all still see the slides or?
Mm-mm. Do your screen share again.
Let's go on to Barbie. It's
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure what's happening.
All right. Okay, can you see my screen yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. It's thinking.
There we go.
Okay. All right. I am Barbie Chambers, and I teach at Texas Tech University, and I'm an associate professor of practice there. And so you can see my screen, is that right? Because it's blinking very strangely for me. So
We can see it clearly, no blinks.
okay, that's good because I can't see it. All right, so we'll push forward anyway. So I am a professor of practice at Texas Tech, and I am a newbie when it comes to OER. So this was my first experience to adopt OER and use it in my classroom. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that. The summer of 2020, I taught for the first time media management and entrepreneurship, which is essentially an undergraduate course for mass students that are about to the capstone class, they're about to graduate. So that I taught that class, and I had 23 undergraduates. And then this fall, I'm teaching a master's level class, and I have 17 graduates. Graduate students. And so this was a new thing for me. And I was really excited to jump into this. I normally teach in the professional communication department and teach business communication amongst other courses. And so I also was teaching in a pandemic, if you've noticed that. And so this was an interesting experience to try to figure out how to do all this in the middle of a pandemic. So why did I decide to use OER? Well, there were several reasons for that. Both of these classes were online, asynchronous, and they were both, the summer class was a late adoption for the summer. It was the week before, oh, can you teach this class? Sure. And it was a new prep also. So I was really trying to figure out what was going to be the best resource for me to use, and talk to my colleague, Jeffrey Graybill, who recommended both the Media Innovation and Entrepreneurship book as well as the OpenStax Entrepreneurship book. And so I was very excited to be able to incorporate both of those. The other thing about the summer course is that I knew that I would be teaching the graduate class in the fall. And so I felt that I could just build on that and actually have a little bit of time, hopefully, to plan instead of a week. So, but yeah, the other thing was that there was the pandemic. So that continued to be a recurring theme. Well, my experience with using OER in the classroom was I definitely found it to be easy. It was easy to put together. It was convenient to adopt. I was able to start right away putting my course together, especially because I was having to do it at the last moment, and was able to use these resources and be able to not have to wait. And my students also didn't have to wait to get the books. And so that was very, very helpful. And then also I was able to focus on credible resources because people had already done the work for me. And in this area of media entrepreneurship, and just general business entrepreneurship, there are so many resources out there. And it could be somebody trying to sell a product or service or whatever. But because I knew these resources had been vetted, I knew where to kind of focus in and spend my time and be able to give my students quality, credible resources. The other thing is that I liked the fact that it was just, again, that instant access. I didn't have to wait to start planning. I could go ahead and get that done. And of course, the student cost was something that we were very cognizant of during the pandemic, as people began losing their jobs and getting sick, had students contacting me, they had COVID, they didn't know what to do. And so it was just a time period where it really fit very well. The other thing I really enjoyed about using OER was that I was able to blend course materials. So I adopted both books and used both books resources consistently, but I also was able to tie in other resources that I had. And that allowed me to use that modular format to suit the needs of the learning objectives specifically for that specific area. Now, I did some really extensive research with 8 students and the past couple of weeks. And had I known this was going on, I would have really talked to my students this summer as well. But since they were all seniors graduating, they're gone. I had one summer student that responded. So I was able to chat with 8 of my students. And as you can see from this graph, they definitely are all from the graduate course, plus they're all older. And so it was interesting to get this and working full time. And so it was interesting to get some feedback from them on how they viewed OER. And here's some of the feedback that I received and asked them, how much do you agree in specific areas? And so they, one of the things I really thought was that they were going to tell me that the pandemic made it difficult for them to purchase course materials. But because these were more professional graduate students, that didn't rank as high. And so I think that would be different if I was actually talking to undergrads. The online accessibility, of course, made it convenient. The first time to use OER, several had used it before. And then I was very curious to ask them about using OER without online supplements. Now, that does not mean the instructor resources, student resources, but with some of the other publisher materials that I had used, of course, there was a platform, like McGraw-Hill and Connect. And so I was curious what they thought about that. And so they still thought the value was there, definitely in the OER. In addition, they thought that it would be great to have more resources in OER. And they felt that it provided the same value as paid text. And then it made their courses easier to take, and using it during the pandemic also helped them to have more convenient access to course materials. And then they really, the highest thing was they thought that using OER in an online class was more effective than in a face-to-face class. Thought that was really interesting. In addition, here are some comments that students make that I thought was that were really interesting, especially when you can tell that these were graduate students, some of them. And so the first student, one of the great advantages of OER textbooks is the content is more timely and up to date than it can possibly in a printed textbook. I enjoyed the content, although I thought much of it was very basic for a master's level course. I did find initially assessing the navigation within the site to be a little challenging. Neither interface was as intuitive as I would have liked, but overall I've appreciated having these resources available rather than having a textbook. Now, that comment about it not being at the master's level is more about me not making it a little more challenging using some of the other resources. The other one that I thought was interesting, talking about it's a great resource, but it's difficult to open when you're at another location. Also, if your internet is down, you're not able to see anything. To me, a book would have been better. Now, this student obviously didn't know that you could download the PDF and that, or even, purchase the book. So I thought that was interesting. And this was a student that was an older student. So I thought that was interesting as well. The other comment that I received here, and of course, I think my computer is going to do exactly what Jeffrey's was doing. I'm just going to read you the rest of it because it's just really, really titillating what I was going to say. Okay. Then I thought this was an interesting comment. I would suggest using a book for the hearing impaired. Sometimes I would want someone to read to me out loud, but there wasn't an option for AI to read to me. And so again, coming from an older student, I thought that was interesting. Then these also were good comments. It's convenient for both time and money. It's an awesome concept that I think would be great to see more widespread use of. And during the pandemic, there has really been a shift so much to digital that I really missed having a book that I could highlight and reference without pulling up links. But it was convenient not to have to purchase a book and rush to get it for class. And then finally, the OER textbook made it a lot easier to understand and navigate, as well as save money. Sometimes professors require you to buy the textbook, then use it once or twice. I like the OER textbook much better, and I highly recommend it. Thank you, Dr. Chambers. Please do that on my teaching evaluations. So what is next? Well, I'm going to continue to find more opportunities to use OER. And did I mention doing that in a pandemic? So I've really enjoyed using it. I can't tell you how much that I've really enjoyed the Media Innovation textbook as well as OpenStax, but I'll be happy to answer any questions when we're done.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeffrey. I've got your slides in a PDF format if you want to jump to those last few and talk about them.
I can just talk. Yeah, if you want to, that's fine. If you pull it up, I can talk a little bit.
Great.
And we want to leave time for questions.
Exactly. There you go.
All right. So can you go up to maybe the, yeah, that's one more. Okay, cool. So yeah, we were talking about OER as an advantage for online delivery. And I mentioned earlier the conditional release. The other thing that's really great about the text is each has learning objectives in each chapter. If you look, it's hard to read there on the Excel file there, but essentially that's a planning document for each chapter with each module where you can address things like what are the learning objectives, what are the readings, what are HTML resources, what video resources are included, what Web 2.0 resources, is there a reflection, is there a quiz, assignments, so you can plan out for each module which item with that, and that's what I use to kind of map out the material. And then next slide, please. So the other thing for the grant, we're required to do research. As you know, one of the things we look at is the drop-fell withdrawal rates, which during the pandemic are probably going to be skewed, as we do know more and more students are withdrawing, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. Although our courses have been lower than across the university. We look at student outcomes in terms of grades. We're going to be doing kind of like Barbie just shared with you, some surveys and interviews and focus groups with the students in the course, pre-test and post-test, their basic entrepreneurship knowledge. And of course, we're looking at, we were interested in other adoption of the resources. So, who else may be using this? So if you do use the material, please do let us know. And then, it's also had a ripple effect. So in my college, we were the third large-scale grant from Affordable Learning Georgia. There, I think we now have a fourth one. So, that's in the matter of international business management and an introductory business course. So it's contagious that more and more people in the college and the university use it, the more others like to follow suit. With this course in particular, the 3101 course, we use a lot of part-time instructors. And so they don't have pedagogical background, most of them, they don't have academic experience. So they, it's trying to get them to buy into using the material. And that's also one of the reasons in teaching the later courses, depending on, and we had probably 15 different instructors teach the course in the last 3 years. And so depending who taught the course, it was a very different experience for students. And so then you couldn't rely on that foundational knowledge being there. As I taught both 3101 and our 3102 and 3103, I would reference, in 02 and 03 as you learned in 01, and I would get blank stares. People are like, well, no, we didn't learn that. So having the shared text helps address that. And we want to continue to do research and, SOTL, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, research and data collection around that. That's my contact information, and now's the time for Q&A. And then we have links for all these materials as well in here. Thanks for sharing, Michelle, and we'll all take your questions now.
Great. Sorry, I see a question. Let me see. Would you like to share how teachers respond to train the trainers meetings? Yeah, so just like Jeffrey just talked about, many people come to teaching as a whole. with or without a pedagogical background and having taught before, and particularly this area, and particularly in entrepreneurship. And many feel ill-equipped to be able to teach this material. And so having organized it to teach the material in a way that made it accessible for even the educators to be able to use and deploy the material was really key. To create that structure and to make sure, as Jeffrey said, that we were providing a consistent experience to students as they were moving through the text and they were learning the material. Also, in terms of the trainer model, I still maintain that community of practice and relationship with those professors. I'm continuing to work with Jeffrey on research that looks at pedagogically how best to teach aspects of this work using digital and online resources. And we attempted to really use those weekly calls to support the educators who felt ill-equipped to do it. And the feedback was fabulous. I'm hoping we're able to do that again on a continuing basis, but basically provide education to the educators at the same time as they are flying alongside. And it was wonderful because they felt like they could come to those weekly meetings and say, oh gosh, this just went totally sideways last week. What do I do? And they had a community of people there on the call who could help answer how to recover, what might be next steps. This is an assignment that I used, and it really helped to, I think, expand the use of this resource as well as the adoption of these types of classes in schools across the globe. And so some of the international students have used this resource in classes across the globe and also found it of value, even though it is all in English. But it is a tremendous resource that I think was really valuable to add that component of fly along to test the structure, the content, and the delivery of the material in the MI and ebook. Liz, did you want to add anything, or Jeffrey as somebody who was beta testing for us?
I would just add, I think both Michelle and Liz mentioned, the involvement of students, which is certainly an OER best practice. And so one of my students created a sidebar for the chapter that I contributed to the text. And so I think that's important as well, in addition to kind of training trainers and training faculty. Involving students is important to get their input in content creation as well.
Liz, do you want to speak to the kinds of feedback that we got from students beyond kind of a lot of it was glossary concepts, making sure we define terms like that, but was there other feedback that you noticed?
We received hundreds of pieces of feedback, all of which were taken very seriously, and almost all of which were addressed in the second iteration. But I would say that if I had to group them all into one category, they would be areas of clarity. So entrepreneurship can be a bit of an ambiguous subject. It can be hard to understand. And it was sort of areas where perhaps the writing was such where a student wasn't fully understanding a concept, or they wanted more clarification, or they wanted something described more fully. And it was really places like that. And we really tried to, address those. And it was so interesting to see, in a traditional publishing process, you don't get that feedback directly from the reader, from the end user, from the consumer, in time to make changes that can benefit the future end users and readers of the book. And so we felt very fortunate to have that feedback.
Absolutely. Other questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question, or pop your question into the chat as well, either way. Actually, there's Facebook groups. There's a Media Entrepreneurship Facebook group there that discusses these topics on a regular basis. And so you can look there as well. We continue, as I said, to maintain this resource. And so as Liz urged you at the end of her presentation, if there are any of you here in the audience who might be interested in working with us on continuing to build out this resource, we are looking at building in some of the video assets that Elizabeth mentioned would be on the YouTube channel, as well as, again, making this a polyvocal, collaborative, inclusive, and accessible resource to all students. So if you are interested, please reach out to myself or Liz so that we might bring you into our tribe of collaborators.
And I will add, just from a faculty perspective, having the peer review aspects are really important for us. It gives more credibility to the outcome of the product, and it counts for something in terms of promotion process. So that part is very vital as well, which both Rebus and OpenStax does a very good job of doing that piece.
And I'm going to add one more thing, because I think Jeffrey had it on his slides, but he didn't talk about it extensively. One of the challenges is I've been teaching media entrepreneurship for over 15 years. And so the online version and what we've done here in this book is a compilation of a lot of knowledge from a lot of people who have been innovators in this space. And I think as educators moving through the academic system, this content has difficulties. One, because you're not just introducing a whole new area to our discipline in media entrepreneurship and putting a finer point on it, but you are also exposing people to these open resources and understanding how to learn on their own. And part of the work is building that cadre of basically university champions. And so our goal was really, in order to maintain these types of courses, you have to have somebody, an enthusiast like Barbie Chambers, or a champion at the local level at your school who is pushing for not only these open resources, but this type of curriculum. And I think the open resource has made the diffusion of this course a much faster and much easier one on the educators, as well as providing a community from which educators can do their research and have it count towards tenure in the academic scene. So we have been and continue to do research in and around this area, and invite you to join us on that journey and make sure that you can continue to be in your institutions fighting for entrepreneurship and innovation and open resources for your students.
And to answer Herbert's question, since the recording's about to stop in about a minute, is we're very early in that, but yes, the intent is to eventually publish scholarly research into this, and we welcome if others are interested in that. If you have adopted it, please let us know. If you're interested in collaborating on that as well, let us know. We are very early in that process because the OpenStax book is brand new and the media book is 3 years old. So, but yeah, we do intend to eventually publishing some kind of scholarly research in that. So please do stay in touch there. And I know the recording will stop here in a minute, but we'll stay around a little longer to answer any additional questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
So
Thank
great
you.
to see everybody on the call. And I'm going to try and capture everybody before we leave.
I'm going to stop the recording, but you're welcome to stay for 15 more minutes if you want to continue your conversation.
I just want to add that if you do use the book in your